Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Best Practices for Security or for Securing Modern Cloud Native Application with ActiveCampaign CISO, sponsored by Snyk. My name is Carol Auth of SANS. Today's featured speakers are Chaim Mazal, Vice President of Information Security at ActiveCampaign, and Simon Maple, VP Developer Relations and Community at Snyk. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And yeah, why don't we jump into some introductions and talk a little bit about what we do and the companies that we work for, and then we can jump straight into some content. So why don't I start? My name's Simon Maple. I work for Snyk, a developer-first security company that provide a platform to enable developers and security teams to work together to secure your cloud-native applications from code all the way through to your environment and your platform. I run the developer relations team at Snyk. I'm very keen to produce content and engage and discuss with developers and security teams all over the world. Joining me today on this webinar, I'm very pleased to introduce Chaim Mazal, who works as a CISO for ActiveCampaign. So over to you, Chaim.
Appreciate it, Simon. Thank you so much. My name is Chaim Mazal, and I'm the head of information security at ActiveCampaign. Today, I currently oversee a security organization that includes secure cloud engineering, secure product engineering, security operations, information technology, as well as risk compliance. Prior to joining ActiveCampaign, I had the opportunity to build security programs at two of the highest valued SaaS startups in the Chicago area. Able to lean on my offensive security background to build security programs that really focus on developer enablement at scale.
Awesome. So Chaim, you have a real job, whereas I just kind of like fly around the world and talk to people, but you have a real importance around your company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Tons of work to be done and never a dull moment.
Awesome. So that's us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Maybe we have a chat here. We have some questions. Feel free to engage with us, and I'll ask some of those questions as we go. Feel free to drop into the chat maybe who you are, where you're from, and maybe what you do, you're a developer or security or something else in the org. So we can have a chat. Okay. So we're going to start with this agenda, really talking about the progression of how applications have changed. Obviously, people are deploying applications in a very different way today to how they did 5-10 years ago. And we're going to look at the considerations that need to be made with respect to how we think about security, where it lives, and what we need to care about at different stages of the pipeline. And we're not just going to go into theory, of course. We're going to talk with Chaim about how he and the team and the organization have managed their security program and practices in a real world SDLC and application. Of course, we're going to have Q&A as well, so there'll be a short number of slides. We'll jump into discussion, and we'd love to take your questions as well. So feel free to be active on the chat and the questions. So why don't we jump first of all into how our applications have changed, and we'll talk a little bit about how this is how ActiveCampaign have gone through this progression as well. But largely this is how we see it, and on the left hand side here, this is the kind of like pre-cloud deployment, whereby your application typically consisted of your developers writing custom code, pulling in a number of open source libs, and that was the application they threw across. The classic wall scenario where you throw an application across, and then you have this operations team that looks after this platform, servers and your VMs. They look after your network. They virtualize that on some hardware. There are a number of other applications that, of course, your application needs to interface with. We've heard this term, this buzzword, digital transformation, moving across into a cloud environment, and what that means to the application, and rather the scope of the application. We can see that people are deploying not just code, but they deploy their environment, really. When we think about the fact that you wrap your custom code and your open source libraries within your perhaps container, your Docker container, or whatever environment you use there. Perhaps infrastructure as code, some SaaS services, some cloud environment, whatever config you need to deploy onto that environment as well. Potentially using service meshes, some kind of orchestration under the covers. And there is an amount of additional security concerns that almost like flow up into or down into the developer as a result of the developer focusing on these different aspects of the application. So as the scope of the application and the responsibility of the developer has changed, these various things like looking for known vulnerabilities, code vulnerabilities, config, unpatched operating system vulnerabilities, ports in our whether that's in our config or elsewhere, all of these things then need to be considered as part of the application as we deploy. So let's talk a little bit about ActiveCampaign and how this has also changed across the applications that you've been deploying, Chaim.
Yeah, absolutely. So ActiveCampaign has had a tremendous amount of growth and scale. And so during that growth and scale, obviously we've adjusted our methodologies and the way that we go about deploying software and the way that we go about having collaboration amongst all of our teams. So just a little bit about ActiveCampaign so we can understand some of the growth and scale here. And what about ActiveCampaign and what we do as a whole. So ActiveCampaign is a category-defining customer experience automation platform, right? We help over 150,000 businesses in 170 countries. And the whole idea is to help our customers meaningfully connect and engage with their customers, right? So we create optimized customers experiences by automating all these things behind the scenes, whether that's marketing, sales, support processes. And so businesses of all sizes have access to a lot of functionality and a lot of flexibility that generally used to be, separated for Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, right? And so we really focus on marketing automation, CRM, machine learning, and cross-channel orchestration and segmentation and personalization. So chances are, no matter what your business lifecycle needs are, ActiveCampaign automates that. And so just a couple quick stats here so we can talk about the scale and growth. So as we see, we're 60% of our business is global. We have 800 employees internally, which means we have about 250 active developers within our organization, right? Very product centric organization. Over 300 integrations that we have, whether that's built internally or externally through our empowerment programs. And all of these things are happening at breakneck speeds. So in order for us to be able to do that, we've really seen this kind of transformation and development that's happened within our platform just based on the technologies that we currently use. And I can talk about those in the next slide just a little bit. So we go. Traditionally speaking, we start off as a PHP shop, right? All modern implementations of our platform have essentially been cloud native, right? But there's a lot of different levels to what cloud native is and what cloud native means, right? A lot of the early shortcomings that we talked about in those, other kind of older ways that people used to develop, deploy, and maintain software, right? Those are still applicable to the cloud if you don't have the right pieces in place. So as we progress, a lot of those things existed. As you can see, we have, traditionally we had a monolith PHP application. As you can see, it's sitting on EC2 instances, right? So we have PHP and EC2 instances, right? Then we have Python and Java. You can see cleverly we put it, it's sitting in now it's containerized within Kubernetes. We also use GitLab as our CI/CD pipeline and deployment mechanism to go ahead and plug in to a couple cool different tools. We recently built a new product line of our landing pages application, which is written in .NET. Right, and primarily our front end is all JavaScript, right? So as you can see, through the icons on the slide, Snyk covers all of this. Doesn't matter at which stage we were, and our current evolution of how we're going ahead and actively deploying and maintaining and consolidating our software deployments and management. We're able to get full coverage through a lot of the tooling that's provided through Snyk, which is incredible and it's been a huge level up for us. That's the basic technologies that we have in play today. And then I guess to talk a little bit about just the general deployment progression that we have here and some tooling that we plugged in along the way. So local development, and we have Snyk plugged in there. So by the time we actually go through our CI/CD pipeline and we do a lot of things, we're not actually having vulnerabilities or things actually produced even to our staging environment, right? Days of old, right? Staging is where you worked out all your kinks and you really made sure that you chewed up and you did things in an honest way. Today, we're able to get real-time feedback and local dev and through our CI/CD pipeline with using a whole bunch of integrations and a lot of amazing tool sets to be able to get real-time instantaneous feedback that allows our developers to make real-time decisioning that's going ahead and reduce risk across our platform, which is a tremendous value. I think it's like agile to the second power, right? We click a button and we have the ability to instantaneously upgrade packages and to know which versions we should be using without developers having to feel like it is something that's bolted on or something secondary in nature, which is tremendous. We also use in our production environments for different kinds of monitoring, we use threat stack to monitor containerization. We use cyber reason for our EDR solution. We have our SIM is built out through Insight IDR. And then for our overall configuration container management and for any things that we look for that would be outside of the norm as how we're continuously deploying within that production environment, we have Snyk enabled to give us continuous and constant feedback all the way through.
And I love the arrow pointing left, pointing to proactive, and pointing right to reactive. I think that's a really key thing to kind of mention there in terms of on the left making very intentional decisions at your own pace, and the right reacting to something that's happening in your production environment and needing to make a quick decision, and maybe not the best decision, but something that needs to fix that issue quickly. It's interesting.
Absolutely, and a lot of that comes through some standardization that I think we'll talk about here soon, and having that acceptable baseline, and then giving developers the flexibility to be able to build and deploy as they need, right within the confines of those norms, but allowing them to have the freedom to introduce things right as they go that's going to allow it to be turned around for quick value to our product and to the organization as a whole, right? So having guide rails, but flexibility is key to the whole thing, right? So we got to make sure that we're dynamic and flexible. We're producing a tremendous amount of code and product and making sure that everyone has exactly what they need and we're not impeding anyone's ability to deliver that value while we're still remaining secure and reducing risk as early as possible. And this is just a 5,000 foot view of how we deploy our containerization as today, right? So you can see we have elastic load balancers, we have EKS, we have registry for our version management, data stores reach back, and then we have our control plane for IAM. We use Vault and also for Terraform configuration management, threat stack, GitLab, Snyk, and then Jira and Slack for continuous team enablement through communication channels, just so we can make sure we have full visibility and we have full auditability, and everything that happens is automated and seamless while being able to provide the utmost visibility across the org.
Awesome. And when you kind of like change the tech stack into this, what we see here, how receptive were the organization to making these changes from the? Let's talk about it from the developer point of view, because I think that's what we're going to talk about going forward from a security point of view as well. Yeah. How quick were developers to pick up on the newer technologies?
So I think we had like a definitive line in the sand where we said, you know what we're doing is great, but it could be amazing, it could be excellent. And we have this entire kind of, we talked about it a little bit earlier, digital transformation. Ours was a kind of DevOps methodology transition and transformation where we said, hey, we want to focus on developer empowerment, right? SRE and the fledgling DevOps team wanted to be able to do things and deploy software and be able to give everyone the tools that they needed to be able to do things in a super productive way. And as a whole, the development organization really kind of drove a lot of the progress here. There was a lot of interaction, there was a lot of engagement, there was a lot of questions. We used to have different working sessions where we would do lunch and learns, where we'd have different sections of the development organization come and they'd figure out how to run kubectl. They'd figure out how to go ahead and deploy their own software. We talk about image standardization. We talk about and parse the organization. What is our base Docker images, repositories, and what is our base core OSs? What do those look like? Right? And everyone has different needs, but how do we create some semblance of standardization so everyone can grab what they need and go and be equipped to be as successful as possible? So for us, in general, to get to that baseline was about a 6-month process. And it was a 6-month process of continuous engagement, continuous iteration, and continuous buy-in. I have to say, at the time, we have our VP of engineering, who's now our VP of our head of DEI, Reem Jaglit. She really kind of helped lead that and was a core partner. And it was an amazing process. And I'm happy that we're continuously innovating on it now, and we're iterating through a lot of it. So teams are responsible from end to end, right? You build, you deploy, you nurture, and all of the tools have been set up for you to be successful. So granted, things are going well. We're continuing to do better, and I think we still have a long way in our journey, but we've made a tremendous amount of headway here in a short period of time.
Awesome. Quick question incoming from the audience as well. Is this a self-contained development environment, i.e., when subscribed to the service, development is performed within the ActiveCampaign environment, where Snyk and other tools are already in place to ensure a secure software development lifecycle?
Yeah. So again, we have things deployed in a couple of different ways through Snyk, but we're really focused on dev local, right? So we wanted to make sure that at the very earliest inception of code, when a developer is brainstorming, when they're finding out unique solutions to current problems that they've been tasked with and challenges, that they have that continuous instantaneous feedback. We decided that we did not want to have things later on in the process, that we needed that feedback loop as early as possible. But yes, we definitely have those control planes and pieces set up in our contained, hosted, cloud-based environments as well. But again, we did that even at the local level, because we believe that, again, the earlier we do it, the more the more current and continuous involvement. It's not something that would seem outside of the regular development process, right?
Cool. So let's talk about, we talked very briefly then about how Snyk was kind of like touching various pieces of that. And I want to kind of like talk briefly about the software supply chain, and really realistically, when we talk about how the applications change, how our security tools or our security practices need to adapt to make sure that the application that we produce is also covered by a platform that enables us to provide testing, feedback, and also remediation advice on that. So when we think of the custom code that we write, very often it's always there in the developer's face and the developer's IDE, and that's very often and sometimes almost too much of a priority for a developer, because it's their kind of code that they write. Whereas actually a lot of what's underneath the surface of the water here in this iceberg are some of the more critical issues that could potentially cause security risks in your application. So we of course start with open source code, and as you can see on the right hand side, some of the stats here as we go down, 80 to 90%, the vast majority of your application is typically open source, and a large number of the vulnerabilities, the vast majority of the vulnerabilities, are actually found in the indirect dependencies. So not even the dependencies that you directly pull in your artifacts, but the dependencies they further pull in order for them to compile and work. So open source code, as we know, is always a big place for vulnerabilities, to pull vulnerabilities in. But as the applications change, we're not just throwing our custom code and our open source code. We then build our applications into a container image, and we deploy that. And with that container image, of course, we have a number of potentially large number of vulnerabilities in our OS and in our containers. Which again, it's very easy to pull in if we're not careful and we're not considering the different types of images that we can pull in, the different sizes of the images, etc. And then beyond that, any kind of orchestration, any kind of like scripting that we do around that looks after our infrastructure. Of course, there are many misconfigurations that are always hitting headlines. We know how many S3 buckets are misconfigured. Anything in our Kubernetes scripts, our Terraform scripts, all of these. It's very easy to be able to use incorrect defaults, or if we're not too used to it, to add in vulnerabilities as we go. So these things under the surface is a significant portion of our application these days, and a significant area that we need to focus on as well for our application. Going back, of course, custom code, we're not eliminating custom code. That is still an area that is important. And yeah, obviously, if we're saying 80–90% of the code base is open source, there is still 10–20% of code that is custom, that is proprietary, and as a result doesn't get all the eyes on that open source packages might. So understanding and recognizing simple things like input validation, the usual things that could potentially lead us to issues. This is a great area that we need a good SAST approach there. Now, this is the platform that I was referencing, and this is the area that kind of like that Snyk offers today with this cloud native application, and this is the new risk profile of a modern application. So with that, we're gonna stop sharing the screen. Let's not go into slides anymore. Let's just go into some discussion, Chaim, and I want to focus on a few different areas. First of all, we talk about how the applications have changed. Let's talk a little bit about our organizations, and let's talk about how over time at ActiveCampaign your organizations have changed. So let's take security and engineering teams as the core here of the interaction. How have they been restructured or changed? How their interactions are occurring with this new modern deployment environment that we're using?
Absolutely. So traditionally, or when I first arrived at ActiveCampaign, there wasn't really a DevOps team. We didn't have a build and deploy team. We didn't have a tooling team. We had like an SRE type of team that would go ahead and maintain all of our infrastructure. We started off by having a monolith application that was running in EC2 instances, and then we got to a point where we put them in auto scaling groups, and then as we started breaking out the monolith and taking core functionality and turning it into a service-based architecture, right, we would containerize that. But a lot of that was done through this building of our DevOps organization, and through our DevOps organization, some of the responsibilities that was traditionally performed by our SRE org, right, all slowly became shifted to those individual product teams themselves. So the product teams themselves had the opportunity and ability to go ahead again and help us standardize tooling and standardize packages in order for them to actively be successful with building and deploying while maintaining their own code. Some of the things that we've done for that is standardization of golden AMIs, right? Coming up with a different selection of containers that teams have the availability to use, right? Standardization through Terraform, right? And being able to actively manage and go ahead and have full visibility, as well as scanning those things that developers are doing. Because again, the codification and creating, right, all these guardrails is supposed to help enable things be secure, but really supposed to help us be able to deploy at a much faster rate and to be able to do so at scale. We're a global organization, right? And thinking about things like multi-region, being able to replay parts of our application and product and be able to do so safely and securely. And they're not meant to hinder and slow down. And so, of course, these things are going to always continue to iterate, and they're always going to continue to change. And the development organization is going to have certain unique needs, but we try to build things out in such a way that people can use the things that they want, right? But they can do so in an informed way that allows them to do so in a secure way while being able to introduce that innovation. So we think the big shift was, we're going to do everything for you, and it's never going to scale, and we can't get code out the door quick enough. And all these teams are tapping, their toes, like, hey, we're finished, we got it, we're ready. And there was no way that we were able to do that. And we're having to prioritize. And then, we drew that line and we said, you know what? We're going to allow teams to be able to deliver at their own cadence. We're going to allow teams to feel empowered to be able to create things, right, as incredibly as possible. So, even things like having, scanning and looking for changes in IAM roles and things like that, we can do that. And there's guardrails around that, right? The appropriate notifications are set up, people are involved, and people are allowed to pretty much deliver at will. But again, 6 months transformation process, took a lot of effort, but I think there was a yearning for it from our engineering teams. And even since that's happened, we've been able to break out our engineering teams at a more granular level across the organization and really be able to improve overall productivity as a whole. Because before we had things by overall like product segments in a way more kind of condensed way, because similar initiatives, similar infrastructure, and we'll kind of prioritize based on that. And when we really worked on developer enablement and creating DevOps methodologies, build and deploy and tooling, and we said, hey, we watched things break out in much more specific areas that allow people to deliver at a much faster, higher cadence.
Interesting. So what you essentially have is a number of pieces of the organization that effectively create these guardrails that an engineering team is able to operate in. So the engineering team can still make a lot of decisions, they can still craft as they need, but they do it within this almost like this guarded space that the security team, the DevOps team have almost like permitted to say, yeah, these are safe, these are kind of like your rules, and the engineering team can still deliver at the speed they want within those bounds, within those guardrails. With that, did I get that right?
Absolutely, hit the nail on the head. And security and DevOps and SRE collaborate this, and it's something that we frequently revisit to make sure that everyone has what they need, and that we're definitely setting people up for success.
So with that then, where you have like parts of the organization like the security team, the ops team, the DevOps team, with those pieces that are supporting the engineering team, and then the engineering team that are empowered to deliver at their own speed, were there any areas or were there any times where you felt conflict or you felt any inertia going from a different model to this model, whereby perhaps people weren't comfortable with these changes, and what were those specific areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be pain in any growth, right? That's how you know things are going well, when you have some kind of friction, when there's some kind of kind of initial foray into disagreements, right? Because if everything is going smoothly all the time, right, it means that you're not pushing the envelope far enough and you're not really digging in for innovation. So some of the things that we kind of experienced initially early on is that, right, teams who said they did not have the ability to deliver on time because of their limitations with how we had things broken up. When things were starting to be enabled, everyone had an opinion of what they needed and what they wanted. As we can understand, the divergence is probably pretty great from team to team, right? We want to use this, we would like to use this, and being able to give everyone the tools that they needed and create in parts of the organization for a kind of general semblance of normalcy was not an easy task, right? 2 engineers, 3 opinions. And so, working through a lot of that was difficult. And then also too is going through the training and going through having people actually utilize these things that were built for them, and then having them be able to scale with it and in the way that was meant to be used and how it was created was also not the easiest thing, right? We create all of these amazing things. And in the beginning, developers were like, this is more difficult than our last previously negotiated situation, right? Like this is not easy. And so just like anything else, it takes time for education, right? And with education, then you get adherence, and then with adherence, right, you get productivity, and then at the end of the day, all smiles. But obviously, it's a growth and a gradual process, and so there was a couple of times in between where we were not sure of the overall long-term impact. But again, things worked out really well. People are really happy. We're able to deliver at breakneck speeds, and we're getting product out the door fast, and we're doing it safely and securely, which has been huge for us.
So moving it to almost like thinking about it from a responsibility point of view, purely from a security standpoint, which of the groups would you say kind of like should take responsibility for the security of what is being deployed into production? Is it purely on the developers, purely on another team, or a combination of both?
Absolutely. So this is going to be different for every organization, and I know it's not the easy answer, but I can talk about for us and for our organization what we feel the best way is, and that is number one, security is a cultural value at ActiveCampaign. Everyone owns security, but again, security is an engineering org, right? We help drive and enable and create the availability for teams to be successful with minimal interference and drag, right? So you have to care about security, you have to be security minded, right? But all of that, that hard work has already been done up front, and a lot of that's through collaboration with the actual infrastructure org, with DevOps, with SRE, coming to agreements, understandings, what's the requirements, what are the baselines, and then how we can best go ahead and continuously work with our development organization to make sure that we're continuously creating visibility, we're continuously having security be top of mind, and as we go ahead and approach new kind of segments within our business growth, that we are taking into consideration additional risks that we may or may not be adding as a whole, holistically, right? So we're trying to keep things very unsiloed, create culture, but ultimately security is the one driving, security is the one pushing forward. because if security is everyone's responsibility only, right? Then it becomes, unfortunately, no one's responsibility. Everyone has their own core key mission statements in the world. And if security can drive and push forward and build that culture, then I think you get everyone who's willing to circle up. But nobody wants to be tasked with doing the work that someone else isn't willing to do, right? So,
yeah, cool. Let's jump on to, so we've talked a little bit about people, which I think is the most important area, and org changes and the way those groups work, the culture, the mindsets. That is by far one of the hardest challenge and the most important challenge as well, to get these kind of flows, processes all working. But there are other things that need to be considered as well to create this kind of true DevSecOps style in an organization. Others, things like the technology choices, things like the tools and the processes you use. So let's go into that a little bit more. Why don't we talk a little bit about how the tech stack has changed into a little bit more depth, and which of those adjustments that have been made have perhaps helped your security profile, which have potentially given you bigger headaches, or which maybe are just like replaces some headaches with similar headaches. Which ones have made things better, which have made things worse?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer that you have to have the right tools for the job, and there's many good solutions out there, but every organization is going to have to pick what's best for their current posture and what's best for their current trajectory. And we did a lot of things internally early on that were very heavily involved from a people perspective. A lot of manual, reoccurring tasks, performing internal audits, revisiting lists as a whole, having conversations about what things needed to be addressed, and how we were going through like parts of our secure software development lifecycle in different stages, with some great tooling and with some other not so great tooling. And I'll just give a quick example. We went through this process where we wanted to do an entire audit, an inventory of all of our managed packages, and that means all third-party libraries or packages that we were essentially using. That process, I'm not going to say what we're using to manage at the time, but an engineer was tasked with doing this, and it took over 2 weeks. And then we came back and we found out the diff of unmanaged packages with the environment and what percentage that was. And the number was pretty alarming at the time. So it went through this whole iteration of how we're going to address these items and issues and how we're going to fix it. And we just recently went through the same process again with Snyk. And I hopped on the call and I spoke with the same exact developer that was tasked, 6 months before initially. And I said, hey, I need a full audit of all third-party packages we're using currently. And the turnaround time is pretty quick. Like, I'm going to need it in less than a sprint. Like, if you get it to me by the end of the week, that would be great. And the developer is making this is Ben Harold too, by the way. Big shout out, amazing individual, senior engineer at ActiveCampaign. And he he's making small talk, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, it was pretty difficult last time, and we had some obstacles. We found out that maybe 30% of our packages were unmanaged, and so we're just having this this conversation, kind of friendly banter. And at the end of the conversation, he's like, hey, hi, I'm not just kidding. I just sent you over the CSV, done and done. He said that he used Snyk, right, to get instantaneous feedback, produce the list, and he said, we did that diff. And guess what? Our percentage of unmanaged packages from what I checked last time went down by over 20%. I said, that's incredible. That means we're making active changes here in the organization. People are showing up, people are excited. So if you don't have the right tooling in place, if you don't have the right visibility, right, it's hard to make the right adjustments because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have a quick, easy, flexible way to get instantaneous feedback, then it's very hard to make continuous iterations that improve your overall risk posture for an org.
Wow, that's amazing. And I might be biased coming from Snyk, but I think that's we've just recorded the trailer for this webinar, so that's perfect. Thank you for that. so yeah, I mean, in terms of things like that, they're extremely hard to track because it's like trying to find almost like the invisible areas of your application that you can't see and understanding where these risk areas are. As a result of moving more to a cloud native environment, have there been new risks that just weren't a concern for you previously that now are just far greater in a new environment like this?
Yeah, so we always, I think like since we're always in any modern iteration of our platform have been cloud native, but there's definitive levels to that, right? Like, you know, what as we expand and grow, and as our number of assets and our number of regions and our number of overall just accounts and VPCs and how we look at things, right? And especially in our production environments, we have different new ways of deploying code and making sure that we're checking these in. It's definitely become more of a challenge. We've definitely brought in a couple unique tool sets to be able to do things at scale. And one of the things that, again, I think is very, very incredible and been very helpful from us, even from like a DevSecOps like perspective, is we have the ability, right, on every single deploy to check Terraform for misconfigurations. Little mistakes, right? Again, things that that people are actively working on and doing, and you know, aren't taking things into consideration, and it's all within the guardrails. But you know what? Maybe we're that S3 bucket is public, or maybe we just created a new, you know, security group policy that was permissive to you know, external entities. Like maybe those things happen sometimes, and we have direct, instantaneous feedback at the earliest point of our deployment with some of this tooling to be able to get. So as we utilize more technology, right, things don't get easier, they get more complex. So you have to make sure that you're getting more continuous feedback and you have more security processes in place to be able to have that visibility. So the more you have, the more you need, and it's always this continuous effort. But I think with making some smart strategic you know, investments, you can automate, right? You can get continuous feedback and you can have things be extremely visible org-wide. Another one of the amazing things is we have incredible dashboarding and incredible metrics that we are now able to produce from Snyk as well, where we didn't have before. So we can break things down at a product level within our org and break things down. And we can even gamify and say, hey, we have teams who have the ability to look at other teams' scorings and ratings, and we have this baseline and any variance within there, and teams are actively pushing each other, right, to do the best job that they can. So I think
yeah, no, I was just about to say there's actually a question that's just come in in the last 5 minutes or so, which actually speaks, pretty much asks a little bit in more depth on that point around measuring, right? Because we talk about feedback, but in order to get good feedback, we need to be able to measure. And Harold asks, you know, do you have measurable stats on improved security for those clients who have adopted your service? And I think that's a really interesting point.
Absolutely. So one of the things that that we've been really focused on is creating a uniform baseline, right? We have things that everyone uses, right? So these are things that are known that we can take into account. Everyone in the organization uses these packages for these reasons. And we say, hey, these versions and all of this is acceptable. But even then, there's some level of risk associated, even with the best, newest, modern version of software, right? So we look at it as a baseline and we say that, okay, if we're going to go ahead and deploy these uniform packages in these uniform environments, right, with these kind of uniform deployment configurations and these containers, right, this is our baseline score. And there'll be variance because as we innovate, teams will introduce new things, right? So we go back on a reoccurring basis and we revisit the commonality of all the things we're using, and we have an understanding of what's acceptable risk and how we can show a downtrend in that risk. Because sometimes, again, as we go ahead and innovate at speed, we add things that might throw that acceptable risk out of whack, but it's top of mind. We create visibility. Developers are continuously thinking about it, and people are going ahead and leveraging that continuous feedback, that visualization through dashboarding to be able to take that feedback and go ahead and iterate. And so we do this on like a quarterly basis. What is our stack? What do we use? What are the most, and that's to bring it full circle, that's what part of the audit was about. Like, what are we using where and why? And like, how do we feel about it as an overall org? What are the main things and what are the outliers, right? And can we assign those to different teams and different products? Which I think is how we started thinking about things as far as infrastructure. So we just related it back to product engineering as well. Why not? It works for infrastructure, so it should work for dev.
Yeah, for sure. Let's now move on a little bit onto kind of like tools and processes, because like, you know, there's a lot to cover here, but we need to kind of like cover each piece because I think they're all very important. So in terms of, let's talk a little bit about tooling in terms of how you you know, improve your security practices or mature your security practices. So how much does tooling help with that, or process help in that you know, maturing the process?
So You have to have tools to ensure you have a process, and tools should be the key indicator when something jumps outside of the process, if that makes sense, right? Again, it goes back to the entire visibility piece. If you don't have visibility into what's going on, then it's very difficult to be able to either A, track progress, or B, know where your deficiencies are. So I think having the appropriate tooling in place and being able to get that continuous feedback loop, right, allows organizations and individuals to go ahead and better redefine processes or redefine the way that the organizations are viewing things holistically as a whole to be able to make those improvements. So again, you know, different organizations do things differently, but let's just say, okay, from the inception, we have developer training, we talk about secure development, we talk about architecture reviews, we talk about you know, scanning third-party software for vulnerabilities and also for license management. Obviously, it's a very, very big deal. And we look at maybe static code analysis. I'm personally not a big fan of dynamic code analysis. You know, some people still use it, some people still don't. It's all good, right? Whether we have internal pen testing, and then, you know, we go to external pen testing, and then open bug bounty programs. So every single step of the way, right, you have to have the right amount of flexibility and the right amount of governance to ensure that people can do what they need to do while we continue to iterate through. So if looking at, you know, security architecture reviews and applying security controls to that, right, doing that work up front with these development teams in different sessions and working through that allows us to basically utilize some of our automated tooling in the next steps, even at local dev, whether, you know, that's Snyk, you know, deep code, other things like that, to be able to say like, hey, we just agreed on all these things. We said we're implementing all these controls. We've come to this agreement, and then in that next step, right, we can actually verify yes, no, right? And most of the time it's yes, but sometimes, you know, unmaliciously, you know, there was miscommunication or there was a break in process and someone goes outside that, we have instantaneous feedback. We're able to catch it early and often, and we're able to continue to iterate and deploy, you know, our amazing product in a secure fashion at a very, 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 very fast cadence. Because with a company with this kind of growth, with our kind of customers, we want to make sure that we're continuing to deliver the highest level of innovation and solve their problems without having anything hold us back or hold us down. And obviously, customer data and our customer security is paramount, and it's top of mind for everyone in the organization, and that's why we focus on it so heavily.
And it sounds like the way you've implemented security, it's never been an afterthought. It's always been fully integrated into your process from day one, right? And that's a real problem when organizations don't do that. When they try and bolt security on, and it's like this last minute thought. And that's really when, you know, whatever you bolt on really slows things down and actually becomes a blocker rather than something that's what you're working through all the way. So how do you make sure that security is truly integrated and is seamless throughout that pipeline?
So I think it starts top down, right? I'm going to be honest. Like our CTO at ActiveCampaign, Tony Newcomb, it's his #1 priority. He, you know, trust is his highest value. And so through this continuous messaging to all of, you know, product and engineering, it's been tremendous. And so there's been a lot of reverberations around that. Also top of mind for our CEO, our entire executive team are very big supporters. And so I think by having these communication channels open, and we also have a security product engineering team, which actively is creating security features for our customers to use as product value. Just as an example, you know, that's multi-factor authentication, you know, end user security analytics for administrators, you know, single sign-on, all of these different things that, you know, security teams are helping. Our internal authentication and authorization service as a core platform service, API gateway. So we have security teams that are developing software for our customers and also for our internal platform. And I think that a lot of these things of having security championed by leadership, by having security actively being an engineering organization and building alongside everyone else creates a very different alternative perspective that I've seen in a lot of organizations, where security is like an advisory or a compliance role where, hey, like, here's the thing, can you go do that? So we're saying like, hey, we built this thing, can we go do that, right? And so that's been like a huge game changer. We don't have to ask for other people to do things. We can do things together, and we can make sure that we're delivering that value that's top of mind.
Yeah, wow, it's very inspirational. Actually, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now who are thinking, yeah, this is the way it should be done. This is the right way of doing it. This is awesome. So
I had to do it wrong a lot of times before I figured out how to do it right.
Well, you know, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. That's what I always like to think, right? We have to, these things aren't figured out first time round, so it's good to fail. So let's talk about the developer workflow then through an SDLC. A developer has some code, wants to make a change. Let's take an example as to what happens through that workflow before you obviously push to production, whereby security checks need to occur. How integrated is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, it starts with local dev, right? We have some tooling running at the local level. And so I've worked in organizations where we have like a cloud native local environment. So we partially do that, but most of the stuff happens, like we want to make sure that people are enabled to do things even earlier than that. You're sitting at home, we're all working from home now. You have an idea, right? And you're getting after it. You're going ahead and you are coming up with a solution. So we have a whole bunch of things in place. Again, this happens at the epic level, not the story level, where we have all of these controls that we talk about. So a lot of these are, again, process controls that are involving people, conversations, security controls, things that are in relation to that. And then we have the tooling plugin. So we use GitLab for our CI/CD pipeline, and we also have a lot of mechanisms and a lot of tooling that's performed for benchmarking, configuration, auditing, and for things of that nature. But again, and everything is integrated with our progress tracking we use with Jira. So a developer goes and makes a PR and pushes it into the next evolutionary environment. We immediately have cadence with the appropriate developers, an EM or a PM, and then all of that tracking history of recommendations made through some of the tooling. So some of those recommendations could be manual recommendations of, hey, we're building this, this input, right? Have we done things like input sanitization, or have simple things to follow in that relation? And then we also have the automated scanning through tooling that gives us instantaneous feedback, right? So people are able to see if there's an upgrade path immediately, if there's multiple dependencies that need to be upgraded, and need to be able to understand that there's some risk associated, and people can opt out of that, right? But when they opt out of that, which is the amazing part about this process, is there's 100% clear visibility. So the EM, the PM, the team members, right? And then we see like, okay, was it approved? Yeah, it looks good. And we can go ahead and have a conversation about that. But I think that creating that visibility in the process. And then we also focus, again, on a lot of our internal pen testing, which we make sure that we're continuously validating our new features and product lines as they come out. But I have to be honest, like, because we're doing all of that work upfront and early, right? Like things are going pretty well. And then we've engaged, security research community to continuously go ahead and validate our findings or lack thereof within bug bounty programs. We've had incredible feedback and results for that too. So I think it's, as of right now, right, we have local dev, we have staging and production, but in that process, we have a lot of things baked in via our CI/CD pipeline, and a lot of manual people processes where we talk and bake in that culture about what's required and how we can do things in an efficient, secure way.
Yeah, awesome. And you mentioned the kind of like recommendations or remediations, being able to fix it, which at Snyk we're obsessed with this. We love being able to not stop at here's an issue. That's kind of like part of the easy piece of the security. The question is, how do we empower developers to actually go ahead and actionably fix that issue? And how important is that? And when is the best time to do both of them, find it and then actually be able to go ahead and fix it quickly and easily?
I gotta tell you, it's the biggest part. Like that whole traditional security mindset of like, no, like that's done. If you're not enabling the business, if you're not enabling the development organization, technology and product as a whole, on other facets of the business, right? Then you're not doing your job. It's yes, but we can do whatever we want. Like we can solve the problem, we can achieve the goal, right? But with the proper things in place or with the proper scrutiny applied, right, we have the appropriate amount of flexibility to be able to introduce that value. So I think early and often is the easy answer, right? We want to have as much feedback as we can as early in the process. And then also sometimes, where we say, hey, we've been able to identify an immediate upgrade path 90% of the time, right? The developer goes, yes, please, thank you. Like, this is just so, like, it's easy, right? There's no reason why we wouldn't. And then about 10% of the time, you have some of those edge cases and outliers, and that's easy. We just say, hey, we're gonna put an asterisk, right? We have SLAs, we got 1 sprint or 2 sprints. This has to be revisited. We have to redress this, and we have to find a replacement. Like, if the upgrade path wasn't good for us, right, then we probably shouldn't be using this package as a whole, and there's probably a good secondary alternative that we could use depending on the effort that it would take across different product lines. So I think it's not a consistent answer, but most of the time, you know, it's super easy and straightforward, and we've seen a huge amount of progress. Because if it works and the functionality is there, why wouldn't you click the upgrade path?
Sure. So yeah, I'll just say to quick outreach to the audience here. If there's any questions, please do put that in the Q&A. Lots of beeps coming from Chrome right now, but Leah, if you wanted to ask any questions, feel free to put that in the Q&A, and I can ask them directly to Chaim. But let's finish up with one last question for myself, which is really about scale. And I think, you know, you absolutely nailed it there when you're you know, talking about, and we use the word empowering the development organization, or empowering the engineering team to be able to say, here is the solution. I will go ahead and just do that. Making the, a lot of the time it's like there's 2 paths very often. There's the right path and there's the easy path, right? And it's about aligning those so that the easy path is actually the simple one. We provide you with the answer, and it's about, okay, now it makes it actually harder to actually not do that because I'm being given the answer. So when we think about scaling and actually being able to push these kind of practices out, what are the, well, I can flip this both ways, this question, but what are the things that actually stop us from scaling, and what are the most important pieces that we need to help an organization scale delivery of software in a fast way, securely?
Yeah. So I think things that are a hindrance to allowing scale is viewing security as, again, that traditional, you know, no function. We're like, oh, we're security, it's going to slow us down. We're going to have to take these other things in consideration. It's going to take away from our core mission statement. We won't have the ability and time to properly meet our deadlines that we have, right? We have aggressive product roadmaps, things need to go out the door. This is going to be a hindrance. So I think, again, kind of to touch on what you said, that like the right path has to be the easy path also, is that by working with these teams up front, by providing all of these guide rails, by taking their needs into consideration, you're not effectively slowing things down. You're enabling scale for the business, right? You're enabling repeatability. If we do it once, we should have the ability to do it 100 times with a click of a button. And I think by using the right processes and the right toolings, it allows you to do that in a safe and efficient way that creates that visibility. So things that are a hindrance to scale is not automating things, right? Doing things in one-off anti-patterns. It's not having continuous conversations where you're parsing the organization for the overall need for that high level efficiency of deployments, right? I think it's also doing things in silos as one-offs, right? Like, hey, we have this need, we have this thing we're going to spin up, so we're not going to use, and we're not going to parse any of the repos that we already have that have been created for us to use all of those tools. We'll just recreate the wheel. We'll do it again. Like, we have our own unique circumstances that need to be met, and we'll just deploy. And then you create variants, and you're eventually going to have to go back, and you're going to address these things anyway for the organization, right? So it's being collaborative, it's being open, it's being able to go ahead and work as a whole within your technology and product organization to make sure that you're developing the right criteria for success, for repeatability, for automation, and for that cadence of delivery. So yes. The old way of doing things and creating one-off anti-patterns is a good way to slow everyone down and make people hate security.
Question coming in terms of DevOps, how important was it to have a practice of DevOps throughout the organization before adding security in?
So it was huge. We couldn't do it, and we did do a lot of it, and we still have a very small portion that we view as things that we have in a upgrade path or cycle for how we iterate. So before there was that DevOps methodology, everything was retroactive. Everything had to be addressed. We would take large segments of assets or code or product, and we'd have ratings or scores, and we'd ask teams, stop what you're doing. Like, let's look at all of this stuff, and like, we're going to need you to either A, upgrade, or we're going to need you to B, please not use this, or like, let's review configurations. And everything was that constant nag and pull traditionally, and not necessarily even at ActiveCampaign. We've been, very, very fortunate to have done this early on, but in some other organizations, I think once DevOps was enabled, like, we have that ability, like, oh, you need to upgrade your fleet. Like, hey, Chef server's already there. Like, let's deploy a cookbook and go, right? Like, you have that ability and flexibility. Who wrote the cookbook? Security did, in conjunction with the DevOps team, right? Like, you have that collaboration, you have that that ease of use. Otherwise, everything is just you're digging the hole, but you're not getting anywhere, right? And the hole just keeps getting bigger and deeper, and you're not finding that success. So I think DevOps methodology as a whole and DevOps enablement within an organization is really a key, huge deciding factor to pretty much the effectiveness in security as a whole across your entire threat landscape. If you don't have the ability to manage it, if you don't have the ability to create redundancy and automation, it's very hard. You're constantly behind the ball. So to answer the question simply, yes, absolutely. I think having a DevOps culture, a DevOps, a organization that is DevOps focused enables security tremendously and allows you to be able to do things early and often instead of late and infrequently.
Awesome. Well, hand back to Carol in just 1 second, but I just want to ask a very, very quick question as well that's come in. In terms of the size of the company and the size of the teams, security team, DevOps team, engineering team, how possible is this kind of approach with a very, very small security team or even no security team at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think there's been that big DevSecOps revolution where we say, hey, maybe the DevOps team could do it, or maybe SRE could do it. I'm not a firm believer in that. I think that you have to have direct ownership and correlation for things to be successful. But I think also with a small security team, it's possible as long as you're continuously collaborating, redefining standards, and helping the organization as a whole knowing what is needed and how you can help enable them to securely and safely scale. I'm not sure what the number is. We're very fortunate. I have around 25 people on the security team. I have current open 5 headcount. If you're interested, please reach out. And we our DevOps org is probably around 30 individuals as well. So we have like good sized teams, and we're able to work together and really get that innovation out the door. But we weren't always this size, and we started it anyway. So I think at growth and scale, it's definitely possible, and you can make a big improvement in your organization as long as you start thinking along these terms.
That's awesome. Well, Chaim, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've really enjoyed the discussion and chat. Thank you everyone for questions in chat. And a big thank you, of course, to ActiveCampaign and Snyk as well. And with that, I'll pass over to Carol. Thank you, Chaim.
All right.
Thanks so much, Simon.
Oh, sorry. Thanks so much, Chaim and Simon, for your great presentation, and to Snyk for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.